Hi everybody, my name is Leah. Welcome to my channel, Common Sense Ethics. I talk about applied philosophy, critical thinking, personal growth, and other topics. And if this kind of content interests you, please consider subscribing. So I'm doing a new series of videos on the Socratic Method. It's also called Socratic Dialectic or Socratic Dialogue, so I'll use those terms interchangeably. And I came across something really interesting that I wanted to quickly share with you all. So basically, before we can understand how to do the Socratic Method, we need to have the proper temperament. And I came across a really interesting essay online on socraticmethod.net. It's an essay by a man named Max Maxwell. He actually has a YouTube channel. I might try to see if he'd like to come on for an interview. But anyway, he writes about something called the Socratic temperament. Now, what is that? For Socrates, the Socratic method was basically just a means to an ends, and that ends was excellence of human character. So how do we achieve that excellence? Well, Socrates believed that we're on a continuous journey of self-improvement, and that we can do that through the acquisition of knowledge. So the fundamental goal of a facilitator of the Socratic method, also called a Socratic questioner or a teacher, the person leading the discussion basically, their goal should be to improve the character of the listeners or the students. And this is done by making them more receptive to the process of acquiring knowledge and increasing their understanding. And Maxwell argues that the character of the Socratic questioner is really fundamental and important for doing the Socratic method the right way. And it plays a critical role in the process. So he says that there are 4 traits that a Socratic questioner or teacher really needs to be aware of and embody, within themselves. Number 1 is that the Socratic teacher loves to discover his or her own errors. So basically, getting caught in a contradiction isn't something that should embarrass you. It's actually an opportunity to advance your knowledge. On the other hand, sort of the fear of being wrong, of having your worldview challenged, these things are actually the greatest inhibition to developing excellence in critical thinking. So if you don't have the capacity to model a positive attitude about dealing with your own lack of knowledge, you can't really be a good Socratic questioner. Number 2, a Socratic teacher is in touch with his or her own ignorance. Now, what does that mean? We are more ignorant than not, right? So we always want to express a positive and open attitude when dealing with disagreements of fact or interpretation. And so the Socratic teacher or questioner should have a vivid awareness of their own ignorance. This also helps them empathize with their students more in their shared search for knowledge. Number 3, the Socratic teacher models the joy of hard work in the quest for knowledge. The Socratic teacher sees that knowledge is a great treasure for humanity, and the Socratic teacher experiences joy and satisfaction in working hard to gain knowledge. So if you're found to be wrong in some way, that's actually a sign that you're on the right path, that you're on a successful journey towards knowledge, as opposed to those who don't even know that they lack the correct knowledge. And so you should have a positive attitude about this process. Without knowledge, it's easier for us to live miserable and destructive lives. So we should feel a sense of urgency about being successful in our learning. So number 4, the last, the Socratic teacher experiences deep curiosity and the desire for self-improvement. So basically, a lack of curiosity can result from 2 things. Number 1, the self-satisfaction of being out of touch with your own ignorance. So basically, you think you know everything already, and you're happy with what you already know. And number 2 is a lack of curiosity that results from laziness, basically, not being willing to have the patience and hard work, do the hard work necessary to gain knowledge. So basically, the improvement of our understanding can be seen as a continuous process of self-improvement, and a Socratic questioner shouldn't be content to remain stagnant. We should actively work towards improving ourselves in our life, and take opportunities to model that to students when possible. Now, why aren't most people like this today? And what isn't this temperament so important for people to try to develop? Isn't this very different from the way a lot of people interact? So I'll take a stab at answering this. Why aren't people more Socratic in temperament? And I'm going to speculate that there's two reasons for it. The first is that, and this is something that I'm guilty of too, I'm not immune to this obviously, is that we moderns tend to think we have all the answers. And that's because it's a function of how we're educated, and it's a function of media or propaganda, which I'll get to. So if we're to listen to one of my favorite philosophers, Jacques Ellul, often writes about being a reasonable person. And this is really similar to what Maxwell calls having a Socratic temperament. It's actually really a similar thing. Basically, a reasonable person has some natural immunity to what Ellul calls propaganda, as how he defines it. He thought that we basically have a psychological need to be right, and it's part of our human nature, and that this tendency is exacerbated by living in a liberal democracy, because we're compelled to participate in government, so everybody feels that they have to have an opinion on everything, even really complex, nuanced subjects. And so one thing that I've written about a bit is that it's these, matters of public policy or foreign policy, of politics, really can be quite complex, and there's a lot that we don't know. So we shouldn't be so self-satisfied, that we have all the answers. But anyway, when it comes to media, the way that most people in the media conduct themselves is actually the opposite of the Socratic temperament, right? I mean, it's the opposite of their role. Their role is, at least nowadays, seems to be more to propagandize. I don't know that it was always like that. I don't know, but it seemed like there used to be more in terms of journalistic ethics than there are now. Basically, people try to be a little bit more objective, to try to represent both sides, and to ask questions that would elicit both sides, which actually is more Socratic. But now, a lot of times, you see people sort of angrily yelling at each other, trying to sort of spin the discussion one way or another, which is more, I think, a function of propaganda. And then, because of both sort of education and media, people have this fear of having their worldview challenged, and that we need to remember that's actually the greatest inhibition to developing excellence in critical thinking. A lot of people today fear having their worldview challenged to the point that some of them at least are willing to physically attack other people, right? I mean, if you watch, some things that are going on, people fighting each other in the streets. But anyway, basically we should be comfortable with the cognitive dissonance that results from new information. And Ellul says that we should be humble in the face of new or better information than we have. That's being a reasonable person, is being willing to entertain new information, or to integrate it, or to accept when someone might have a good point. Now, in education, it would be nice if teachers use the Socratic method. Probably. It seems to be rarely used today, except for in law school. The way that it's used in law school is a little bit more of an adversarial approach rather than a cooperative kind of relationship, the way that we're to understand that Socrates used it from Plato's dialogues. But it's necessary, it should be necessary anyway, for students to develop more of a Socratic temperament, because it puts them at ease with having their values challenged, and it enhances the joy of the learning process, basically. when you are okay with questioning everything, even your own beliefs. On the opposite end of the spectrum, if you're uncomfortable questioning your own ideas, it can intellectually handicap you and your development for critical thinking, and also sort of handicaps your ability to face uncertainties in life in a reasoned way. So maybe that's what Socrates meant when Plato quotes him as having said, the unexamined life is not worth living. So just to take away here, the number one point before we wrap up is that the Socratic method is so important today because thinking is fundamentally driven by questions, not by thinking you already have all the answers, right? If you think you know something, you're going to be unwilling to seek out or integrate new information into your knowledge base, and potentially you will grow less as a person. So that's what the Socratic temperament is all about. And in the next video, I'll actually go ahead and discuss how the Socratic temperament relates to the Socratic method itself, the rules for Socratic dialectic, and I'd eventually like to actually try to lead some Socratic discussions, and that's why I'm trying to work more on my own Socratic temperament. So thank you so much for watching, everybody. If you like this video, please subscribe, click the bell icon so that you get an alert when I post new content. Thanks so much.